hit the record button. So again, we are here on February 11th. Our webinar presentation today is on offering tours, who, when, and how. And our presenters this afternoon are Judy Wright from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Seneca County, Katie Carpenter from New York Ag in the Classroom, and Jessica, who is going to have to introduce herself because I forgot which farm she's from, but we're very excited for these ladies to really take us full circle in terms of the importance of doing farm tours, how we can do that successfully, and how we can engage with other partners to really make that happen. So with that, Judy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. I would like to thank both Jessica and Katie for joining me today to talk about this important topic. In the webinar series, it seems like we've kind of talked around this, but now we want to really dive right in. I'm really pleased that Katie's here and that she has a lot of experience looking at a lot of different tour types on different types of farms, different types of setups related to her work as the director of New York Ag in the Classroom. If you're not familiar with that program, you really need to. There's a lot of great resources there. And joining us as well is Jessica Hula Fredericks, who is a dairy farmer along with her husband on Insight Farms. And she is going to share her experiences as she has grown tours on her farm over the years and has worked very closely with some of the tours through Ag in the Classroom. So to get the conversation started, we're going to try and answer or work towards answering these 5 questions with our 2 panelists today. And helping perhaps you think about why do farms offer tours? There's a number of reasons. It could be for income diversity, building relationships with the community, what types of tours are offered. There's imagination can be yours. Who would you welcome to the farm is something to think about. Do you want the general public, or are you going to be very specific on maybe just kindergarten classes or some of the youth groups coming for the tour? Thinking about when the farm is open for tours. Just because you're a farm doesn't mean you're open to the public at all times. So you need to be very specific about that, especially as you start to grow your tour operation. And then how does the farm manage visitors? Are they guided tours? Are they open certain days and it's a self-guided tour? And then who's going to kind of lead all that? So enough of me talking. I'd like to turn it over to our true experts. Again, I should have introduced myself. I'm Judy Wright. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Seneca County. And as I was thinking about this, I've been thinking about ag type tours since like the early 1970s, which seems like too long ago. But I really want to hear from both Jessica and Katie. So Katie, did you want to get started, or and then we'll have Jessica follow up?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Katie Carpenter. I am Director of New York Ag in the Classroom, which is an outreach program of Cornell University. So my job is to help K through 12 teachers who may have a little bit of background or no background at all use food and agriculture as a context for learning, taking what they have to teach to help their students meet their core academic content standards, but giving the opportunity for the students to see those concepts in a real world application. And that makes my job super fun. It makes my job super diverse. And one of the things that we do a lot of are teacher tours, and helping them facilitate school field trips. You may have heard of our program, Agricultural Literacy Week. That tends to be a flagship program of what we do, where we choose one book and read it to about 100,000 students in March. But really what I think the most important piece of our work is bringing teachers to farms. My job is to help teachers um, teach stories. Give them stories that they can then go back into their classroom and share a personal experience that they've had to help their students see that application, and then maybe apply that in a project, or in a book that we've provided them, or in a lesson that they get off of our website. So it's really important when we do our teacher trainings, we like to host those on farms. We like to give the teachers a tour experience themselves. Number one, because it grows their own agricultural literacy, their understanding of how our food system works. And then also, they get a really good example about how they could work with a farm to structure a tour at that farm, or giving them the confidence to go to another farm to bring their students to an operation and feel like they just can walk in having a little bit of background knowledge of what they should be looking for, and what their day could look like, because hopefully we've given them a really good example of what that looks like working with really great farms like with Jess. Jess, do you want to give a little bit of background on what you do and on your farm?
Sure. So my name is Jessica Hula Fredericks. My husband Chris and I own and operate Insight Dairy in Little Falls, where we milk 2,700 cows. Um, we, we started small. We were, 145 cows, and have grown from there since 2007. So my past experiences growing up through the Dairy Princess program, and I guess it's always been in me to just keep educating the public, and what we do and why we do it and how we do it. So that's kind of where I've been doing tours for probably the last 10 years here at our farm, and it just kept growing it every year. So
I think what makes experiences really unique, and I love that you're sharing your experiences here in the chat, or what you hope to be offering tours for. I hope that we can try to hit on all of these pieces. We may not hit on all of them, and maybe what you're looking for, but don't hesitate to ask questions. I think maybe where I would start is just talking about, how do you start the conversation with a school or with a teacher, as maybe a teacher reaches out to you. And I'm going to come from the school-based experience, and I know Jessica, she offers not only school-based, but also opening up their farm to the public too. So she can definitely speak on that piece. But what are some things that a teacher needs to know from you, and what do you need to know from that teacher? And I think number one is figuring out what the best communication strategy is for you, to keep in touch with that teacher. Because there's going to be that initial contact, but then what systems do you have set in place, so that you have a good understanding of what next steps are, and that they have a good understanding of what the next steps are. So just starting that with clear communication. Who is the point of contact? It's great to have just one person who is managing those conversations. How many students are coming, and where are you going to, are they going to need a lunch option? Are there any accessibility accommodations you need to figure out? Is there any audio assistance that's going to be necessary for those tours? What are you going to do? You have availability and access for wheelchairs. So I think some of those pre-conversations are really important. Jessica, how do you handle communication with your teachers or with your partners?
So the biggest thing that's happened lately is actually just through our Facebook page with Inside Dairy. We have teachers message on just the Facebook Messenger, but then I also get phone calls because our phone number is on that page. But my biggest thing is, I started working with Herkimer County Cooperative Extension. So when we have tours, what we do is we actually break them up into smaller groups. So Cooperative Extension will come and do individual groups with them. So then we try to keep it like 10, 15 minutes per group, just because attention span can run kind of short sometimes. So anything longer than that is harder to keep that. So so what I do is, when they reach out, a teacher reaches out to me or a group leader, we basically just toss dates back and forth of when we can make something work, but also then I include cooperative extension to see what works for them as well. So it takes a little bit of communication in the back part of it, but it ends up working out in the end because you kind of have to keep that communication definitely open.
And with that communication, I think that's a great piece to bring in, that when Jess is hosting these school groups on her farm, it's not just her providing the tour, but it's also what we see fairly often is that it kind of becomes an event all in itself, especially in the case at Insight, there will be stations set up. And we see this a lot in Livingston County also. So they're coming to that farm for the farm tour, but they also get a chance to maybe hear from a nutritionist or from a veterinarian, or they're making cheese with cooperative extension at one of the stations. Maybe they're looking at feed samples and making their own TMR at another booth. So there are these touch point opportunities. So they hear the tour, they see the tour experience, but she's also working on bringing in these other pieces, or some of our other farms, they bring in other pieces for the students to have additional engagements and exposures to careers in agriculture that they maybe did not know, and probably definitely didn't know were in their communities.
Mhm.
And have you heard value from the teachers on that experience, Jessica?
Yeah, so it's actually really positive to just break them into smaller groups like that. Because you know, you're like you say, you're educating them on a whole nother level that they're not even realizing as far as what aspects and jobs that are out there related to the dairy industry or any kind of business that you have. And then it just makes it easier the smaller you are. To work with them. You know, we have on-farm events that we do. So we do a dairy trunk or treat, which this is going to be our 8th year doing that. And that opens up to the public. Like I said, we started our first year, we had 150 people come through. And this past year we had 2,500 people come through in just a 2-hour window. And from there, I have actually had more people reach out, teacher wise, educators, group leaders, as far as wanting to have come as a school group or whatnot for their own tour. So it's opening the farm up is a little apprehensive sometimes, but at the same time, like I feel like if we don't do it, who's gonna bring them in for an experience and educate them without really pushing the education part on it, just more of the hands-on, and that's where the small group thing comes into play pretty well. But then we also do a farm to food truck hoedown. This is our 3rd year doing that. So that one is more aimed towards adults with the food truck, but families still come, and then we have a live band that plays. And both events of ours are free to the public. So like I say, it's a way to get them out and experience the farm life and a night out, day out, family aspect without, we're not cramming information into them. We have signs and stuff set out, but we're available to ask or answer questions for them as well.
I think that's a really interesting segue from the outward communication and marketing aspect of connecting with teachers and with the general public. Um, and let's segue into a little bit about how you get your farm ready for these types of events. Um, Talk a little bit to us about logistics. Where are people parking? What do you do for bathrooms? How do you figure out how many porta potties per the number of people who are coming in, and hand washing stations, and prepping your farm team to have these many friends come to your farm?
Yeah, so when you had initially sent an email breaking that all down, I was like, wow, there is a lot to it. But at the same time, we've done it for so many years now that you just kind of build off of it. I started really small with just, neighbors stopping in and, stopping what I'm doing to give them time. And then it turned into, friends having family into town and wanted to bring them down. And, like I said, then the school groups, the youth groups, summer programs, even adult groups that get together in the summertime and want to come. So yeah, there's such a vast majority that it is important to figure out, Yes, in the summertime, basically we support the Porta John business because we just have them here. Just because there are so many kids coming in and out. And little kids, you need bathroom facility. Um, you know, if it's one school group of 25, then I use one Porta John. If it gets up to be like 60, 70, you're gonna want at least two. Um, just because otherwise you lose time to them being in the bathroom, and then that's taking away from what you want to be really teaching them while they're here. Um, you know, lunch, if they need to eat lunch. But so you find out what their time frame is that they want to be learning, and then you have to just kind of work from there. Usually we only do like a 15-minute lunch break, but we have facilities with tables and chairs or picnic tables. If it's nice, we set up out on the lawn. We have pop-up tents so that if it looks like it's going to rain, we can kind of keep everybody dry at the same time. So, yeah, you just kind of bus parking. Luckily for us, we have a nice flat driveway with lots of space because with the milk trailers coming in and out, we have a big driveway anyway. So, usually we have someone meet and greet the bus. Typically it's me, but if not, it's someone else here on our farm team and can, unload the kids and then direct the buses where to go. So,
What do you do for parking for your large events? Do you have them park off-site and then take a wagon over to your facility? How do you manage your parking and getting 2,500 people parked in a clean way?
so I call it organized chaos. Um, we have a field right across from the farm, and it doesn't help my husband's crop rotation, but it stays in grass and alfalfa for the past 10 years so that we can, basically you're walking through a hayfield to get to the event. So to me, it's part of the experience. We actually do go and roll it down, which nobody wants to see their alfalfa rolled down, but it just, we make it work. um, when they're here, if it's a small our big groups, we do farm tours as part of the event. So we borrow some wagons from a local dealership, and so we can fit like 20, 25 people on a wagon, and then we have a tour guide with that wagon that goes around the farm. For smaller groups, we have a small bus that we use, especially if the weather's not as nice. So we can put everybody in the bus and go around in groups. But I know not everybody has that, opportunity, but it's definitely been a nice perk for us. We try to be resourceful. That's the bottom line, because we do tours all year long. So it's one of those just make it work situations. But when you have young kids, I find it best to have some sort of transportation system, like a wagon, because I always say it's like herding cats. It's impossible when you're just walking from group to group. Plus they get tired and, can wander. So keeping them in confinement actually does help a little bit with that.
And when you use, I also am a big fan of the wagon system because everyone likes a hayride, including our teachers. They get very excited for that. Do you do a procedure where they're on, you move them to the location, you let them get off and explore, and you give some of your background there, or do you just keep them tight on the wagon the whole time?
Most of the time we keep them tight on the wagon. It depends on how much time they have while they're here. Like if we go up to the grain facility, we'll get out and get inside the building so they can see all the control panels as long as they don't touch anything for the grain silos. And then typically we stay on while we're out by the feed bunks, just because there's typically payloaders and mixer wagons moving around, and it's just safer to keep on the wagon. But when we get out to the calf hutch area, then we let them get out and get off, and then they can, pet the calves and ask questions and that sort of thing. But for the most part, we try to keep them contained, just to prevent anybody from getting hurt as much as possible.
I want to dig into your route, right? Like what is your routes and your stops on the farm. But before we do that, Merlin had a question. How do you account for wheelchair accessible bathrooms?
So what I do is one of the two porta johns, or if it's just one, will always be a handicap accessible one, just for that purpose. So even if I don't know ahead of time that I need one, I just make sure that we always have one. So especially like our on-farm events with parents and kids, and then the Halloween with costumes. So I just try to have at least 2 of them for that, just so they have room in them.
As a mom of young kids with wild costumes, I appreciate that. And I think I'm going to save Merlin's next question for a little bit later, but I want to ask you, Jessica, how do you decide? I mean, you're on a dairy farm, so there is a very specific life cycle story that happens, but how do you decide which parts of your farm you're going to bring your guests to? How do you decide that process, and what do you stop at along the way?
So typically, because they unload at the milking parlor, that's where we start. So they can watch the cows go around on the rotary. We'll go through the milk house procedure. So, we're right where the cows are milking to where it's getting cooled. And then we go into the trailer bays so they can see where the milk's getting loaded into directly. From there, we will get on the wagon and we'll go through the freestall barns. And while we're going through, we're explaining why they lay on sand all day, and then they have the sprinkler systems, and they can eat all they want and drink whenever they're thirsty, and the curtains that go up and down as the temperatures change to keep them warm or cooler, the fans. And then from there, we'll go out to the grain facility, just because it's a big loop while we're doing that. So we'll go up to the grain silos, and then we'll go to the bunker system. So then they can see how we chop the corn and haylage, and then how it's packed down and compressed and covered with plastic and tires. Explain all that, why we do that way, and then come back down what we call the smelly part of the tour, because we're going to go right by the manure lagoon and explain, how we collect all the manure, and then we are big recyclers. So we're taking that manure, putting it back on the fields, so the fertilization, and then that brings us around by our another set of feed bunks and the grain bins, and the mixer wagon. So, we're explaining that whole process as far as, they have a recipe. Our feeders have a recipe every day that they need to follow, and take all the ingredients, mix it together, and deliver the feed out to the cows. But then we're also going back to the manure part. We have separation systems from solids to the liquids. And, that is when, oh, it smells out here. So I'm like, well, welcome to country living. So, and then that kind of takes us back down to our calving pen area. So most of the time, they're really lucky and can see a calf being born. We kind of hold our breath as it's happening to make sure that it's going to go the way you really want it to go naturally, and, not really having to assist, but at the same time, it's reality. And if we have to, we explain while we're doing it, why we're doing it. And then we actually will go across the road to the shop and stop over there. Because then they're going past all the equipment that we have. And then also my shop guy loves to talk to kids about, he's a welder. So, his thing is welders hold America together kind of thing, so, he's preaching that aspect of what, there's a job here as well for that. And then we come back to the parlor, and, if it's time for lunch, we have lunch. If not, if we're transitioning into a different group breakout session, then that's what we do.
Awesome. I think that's a great flow of programming. I will just add in something else I see pretty often, especially when we're leading school student groups through experiences, is having some sort of touch point or maybe a visual at some of those stops, but depending on the time you have available. So letting them touch fees, seeing the different elements of the TMR. Maybe it's having a teat dip cup that's available so the students can pass it around and see without the iodine in it. Seeing what that looks like and how that works. So anytime they can touch a tool or experience that, smell it, touch it, whatever it may be, then it's just adds to their experience and understanding of how this whole system works. Would you add anything to that, Jess?
No, I agree. You know, when we're out by the feed, you know, we'll pick it up, they can smell it. Or we'll have some already on the wagon of a TMR mix. So then, you know, and you can show them the ingredients that are in it. Yeah, I mean, by the baby calves, they just love that they'll suck on their fingers. And so, anything like that, just like you say, anything that they can touch physically, that it will always stick with them.
So I want to ask you, Jessica, how do you get your farm team on board with having all these visitors? Do they protest a little bit? Are they just used to it now? What does your communication and your personal enthusiasm for sharing your operation, how does that translate down to the rest of your team when you have a group that's coming on site?
Well, for me, I'm always excited about it. It's funny because there's some that gets just as excited as I do, you know, so then the enthusiasm's there as far as, okay, well, what do you need from us? What do you want us to do? How can we help? There's some that'll be like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, clean this room and I'll scrub this floor. And, you know, I mean, we try really hard to keep it clean all the time, but it's just those extra steps that get put into it. And then I have some employees that are like, can you not come and talk to us? Like, you know, we'll wave as you go by on the wagon, but like they're just not, you know, socially wanting to talk to kids or adults. They're just, you know, kind of go with the flow. But if you need something, they're there for you. But like I say, like my shop guy loves it. So my husband, he'll go the other way. You know, same thing. He'll wave, but he's like, yeah, you know, how's it going? Bye, kind of thing. So it's such a range. But the ones that are really enthusiastic about it, then we're gonna really find you know, give them part of the tour to say, hey, do you want to go talk about, you know, the cow that's got the hole in her side, the fistulated cow, so that, you know, explain that process. And, you know, so we just kind of fine tune it to what they're good at and what they're willing to do to make it that way. But like I say, there's some that are just like, nope, I'm out. So I respect that if they're upfront about it.
Erin, my friend Erin is on. Hello, Erin. Now, Erin's done tours for us before at her operation. She was one of many that we hosted about 28 farm tours for teachers all across the country when we hosted National Ag in the Classroom. So we are grateful that Erin's opened her operation to us. But she asked a great question. Is there any special insurance or liability requirements for tours?
So to be honest, my insurance company absolutely hates that I do this. But for the most part, everything's covered under our umbrella policy. But for like my 2 on-farm events, I actually have a special event policy for that day, as well as I have to have a health permit. Because like for our trunk or treat, we're actually serving grilled cheese sandwiches, milk, cheese curd, cookies, popcorn, soft ice cream. So like that's all covered underneath that. And then our food truck one, we're not selling anything food wise, but I still get one. The only thing we do serve is an ice cream cone for $1, soft serve ice cream cone for $1, but I still need to protect myself in that aspect of it. So yeah, so basically everything is under the umbrella policy, but the 2 main ones are just the special event policies.
And I'll just jump in here, if not to disrupt the flow of the conversation, but there is a previous webinar that's recorded and available talking about risk management. And so that information is available. And I've heard more than once on previous webinars where the other presenters will say, be upfront and honest with whoever your insurance person is as to what you're doing, and they can go ahead and guide you through it. So not that you're doing anything wrong, Jessica. It's just you're obviously being upfront, and you do. That's a great question. And we are going to be providing a fact sheet at the end of this, and we'll be sure to include some more information on that as well. So thanks. Sorry to interrupt the flow of conversation, but we were here and thought I'd share that.
No, I think that's great. I know Farm Bureau, New York Farm Bureau, they worked pretty hard a few years ago to build that inherent risk legislation when visiting farms. So yeah, I'm sure Judy has all the details and information on that tool. And so thank you for sharing that, Judy. Appreciate it. Now, I think as we talk about you selling your popcorn and your grilled cheese sandwiches, which I love, is so exciting. There's a question about what part of your event is profitable during the tour.
So actually, we don't sell anything besides the $1 ice cream cone just to cover the cost. Our on-farm events are free. I don't charge anything for school tours. I know that's not the norm. On my part of it is I would just rather get people here on the farm to experience what we do every day. We even have clothing available, hoodies, t-shirts, hats, koozies, but at the same time, I just sell those at cost. I'm not looking to make money. I want to educate people and let them experience it. My husband would completely disagree, but hey, it is what it is. Just to me, if I can have one person walk away with a positive attitude from a dairy farm, I feel like I've done my job for the day. So.
And I love that Jess is so generous, number one, with her time, with her facility, her team, and her farm. And I think that is wonderful. And like she said, it's not really the norm. It's not necessarily the norm today. We see there are farms all the time that are just setting themselves up for farm tours to be a big part of their operations in their agritourism world. So as we look at our friends in Apples, we have schools that visit cut flower farms. I see ranges of per student charges from anywhere from $3 to $10 per person is what I'm seeing. And usually with those experiences, the students are walking away with a little something. If they're going to an orchard, they have a couple apples that they're bringing home, or a small bouquet from a cut flower. Or in New York City, we actually now have a New York City based Ag in the Classroom educator, and she's doing a lot of tours with students and teachers to show them how the food system works in the city. And they have gone to microgreen operations, hydroponic operations, mushroom growing operations. And while they're there, usually we find it much more common in the city. Some of those 10 to even $12, $15 per person charges, but the students will walk away with 1 pound of a 1 pound clamshell of greens to take home with them. And so that tends to be part of their experience also. But anytime there's that you pick experience, or just the ability to do the tour and then walk away with something is what I'm seeing a lot of.
Yeah, like I said, we don't charge for anything. I do try to send the kids home with a little plastic cup that we had made with our logo on it. But on the back, it says, "This is my milk drinking cup," so that hopefully they associate, like, when they do drink out of this cup, it's only milk, not juice, water. But just as a little memento at the same time for them to take home. So.
And just on this topic of like when you have your friends at your farm, just thinking about, and actually have a couple slides I can share just to illustrate some of the things we're seeing across the states. Hopefully you can see this okay. But this is actually at Jess's farm. This is Herkimer CCE is leading a cheese making station with students. This over here is just, you can see this is how close their students are getting to agriculture in action. These are some photos. This is a photo from Livingston County, and this is actually their activity stations that they offer during their day at the farm. So they have, and these, we can, maybe this is for another conversation for another day, but everybody structures their kind of day major events on the farm a little bit differently. Some it's a very prescribed. You go to this station with your teacher, then you go to this station. Some do it as more of a free choice of where you want to go. So you can see these are just some of the things like, let's make ice cream, let's make butter, talk to a dairy nutritionist, do a living corn necklace with a germination activity. Let's make some desktop microgreens. So these are all the stations that students could go to during this day on the farm. And here's just a quick example of, here's a wagon tour, but then the facilitator has a bucket of feed that she's showing as they move on to that station. So having those props that they can move around and smell and touch. So I just wanted to show a couple of those images of how some of these larger days work on the farm. Uh, so Jess, you gave us a great overview of, you have either you or somebody else is meeting the bus, giving the instructions. How do you keep time really well with those tours? How do you make sure that they're leaving at the time they need to leave to get back to school and on their buses home?
So if we're divided up into different groups, like when Jenna's here too, we just kind of start a timer on our phones. And then, if one of us ends a little bit sooner than we are, we kind of just hang out and, ask questions to make sure that they were really paying attention to what we were doing. But yeah, the timer on your phone is definitely key, because when it's time to go, they need to get on that bus. And I always say, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, go home. So we really do try to stick to that. And I like, for us, smaller groups, especially with kids, you will lose their attention span really quick. So, we just try to keep that 10-15 minute time frame. But you also have to factor in, if you're walking them, when you got to start moving along to get them to the next group on time, so then that group can start. So really the timer on your phone plays a big part in that.
How did you deal with hard questions? Hard questions from adults or from kids?
Most of the time, anything related to like farming and cow comfort, if you can relate it back to a human aspect, then most of the time adults can really start to understand. If we had to do a C-section on a cow to get the calf out in an emergency, you relate it back to a woman who, has to go in for an emergency C-section for her baby. Sometimes the biggest one is, why do you take the calves away from the mother cows? And a lot of times I use that not every cow is maternal. So sometimes it's more dangerous to leave the calf in with the cow, but also we need to milk that cow in order to feed her baby her milk back, her colostrum back to her. So the nurturing aspect of that definitely helps. There's always what happens at the end of their life, like where do they go? And so you have to explain that. There is the life and death part of it, and then there's well, we do sell cows for beef. If you like your McDonald's or your steaks or that kind of aspect, and typically kids are like, yeah, I love McDonald's. So you're answering them but trying to do it quickly so that they're not stuck on it at the same time. Yeah. So I forgot what the second part of your question was there.
No, that's perfect.
The hard part of it.
Yeah. We had a great question from Megan in the Q&A. The vendors who are doing the add-on stations, like cheese making with CCE, are they doing that day for free? Are your nutritionists coming in for free that day? Are they charging for their time to be there?
No, they're doing it for free as well. Nobody has actually asked me to pay for them to be there. It's a lot of volunteer time and stuff, but at the same time, it's the education part of it that we're really trying to get out there.
Yeah, I would say I would just throw in other groups that tend to be generous with their time to come and do these types of programs that I see. Soil and water conservation. You have one of those in every single one of your counties. I'm sure you're connected with them. They do cool, fun things. They have great demos that they can bring. They're going to, take a shovel full of soil from your farm. They're going to shake it. They're going to do a rainwater test with it. They may have giveaways. I've done teacher trainings where Soil and Water has brought tidy whities, and they've prompted them to do like a soil your undies, bury your cotton undies, different places in your school, and then come back and check on them to see how they have eroded over time, and then having their students like think about why did it happen, why did they erode better here than there. I actually went to a lavender farm up, I live in beautiful Lewis County. We went to a lavender farm, and the farm owner actually she was an ag educator previously, and she had them buried all over her property for one of the classes that she paired with, and she had little stakes up, and so the students, if they came back for her lavender festival, they were able to come and check on their undies that they buried. So it was a great way for them to encourage those students and their families to come back to check on how their undies were doing. So Soil and Water is great to come. Our milk transportation teams, like I always say, we got to give people more credit. They know that food doesn't come from the grocery store. They know, adults and students, they know that food comes from a farm, and they know they can buy it in a grocery store or a farmer's market. What they don't know are all the steps that happen in between. So anytime you can give them a look into what happens when your product leaves your farm until it ends up at its final destination, whether that's processing you're doing on site or something you're hiring out or having come in, or it's going out somewhere else. Anytime you can expose them to a little bit, I think the most exciting thing when I'm doing a farm tour, especially on a dairy farm, is when the milk truck shows up. And then we are usually accosting the milk truck driver because he does not always want, or she does not always want to talk to the teachers. But what they do is so important in taking samples and how their truck works. And they walk us through all the steps of how essential and important their job is to the food safety of our world food population, or our world food system. So I love having them come. If you have like a local dairy cooperative, if you have FFA, Future Farmers of America, if you have a local FFA chapter that you want to build a relationship with, they love to come out and host a table and do one of those fun activities for free. They can get their volunteer hours for it. They have students who have to do supervised work experience, and this is a great way for them to get some of those hours. So those would be other groups I could think of to reach out to partner with you there on the farm when you're doing these events.
Yeah, and I would say like when you are partnering with someone else, it actually kind of takes a little bit of the stress away from having to just do it all yourself. Kind of breaks it up so it doesn't seem as intense. You know, even when you're just, a group of 25, it's still good to just have something else there. So then you're splitting that group in half too. So that works. But yeah, I mean, like I say, 25 kids is good for two groups, but when we get up to, we've had up to 125 in a class, a couple classes come, and yeah, 6 stations. So, but also, it's really important to figure out how much time you want to spend on a tour. For us, if it's younger kids, we don't go more than 2 hours. With a lunch break included in that. If they're a little bit older, we might push it more to 3 hours with a lunch break. just because we can spend more time like out by the feed bins and talking to the feeders in the shop, explaining, the different jobs, the mechanic side, the welding side, you know, parts inventory and everything, management of that aspect. Sometimes even a salesman shows up, so then we do hound them. So as much as they hound us. So, it's payback. But yeah, so you can break it down a little more when you have older kids versus the younger ones. So, but yeah, your time frame that you're gonna have them there for is definitely crucial to figure out how you need to break it out and do it.
Uh, is there anything else you'd add about the experience of hosting lots of friends to your farm, or that you would think is an essential piece if somebody reaches out to somebody to schedule a tour that you wish you knew a long time ago?
Um, a long time ago. uh, yeah, I don't specifically, not off the top of my head. Like like I said, I've just evolved with it. I've been fortunate, that I do have friends that want to bring their families and stuff here. So like I feel comfortable even if they say, "Hey, can I bring family in?" They're in out of town, and if I'm not available, I feel like I've taught them enough that they could just go and do it themselves. Um, but at the same time, insurance purposes, letting people just wander around freely is not really the best option. Um, but yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, okay, time management. That's the biggest thing while they're here. Because you want to make sure you get in everything you want them to learn and understand in that short time frame. Because we've done that. We've spent so much time in one area, and then you're like, oh man, we really should have been here too longer. So, but yeah, but at the same time, you got to make sure they get back on that bus, and you don't want to make the school mad so that they don't let them come back. So, but there is one thing I've learned too, when teachers are asking or school groups, how much does it cost per kid, and you know, they're very specific on that because per kid, some schools are, 10, 15 per grade, where you have some that are, 125 per grade, and that cost adds up. So if you really want them there, then you would have to really lower your price that you would charge. Like I say, I don't do that because I don't want to ever deter them from not coming to our facility and our farm. But that is something to keep in mind. I guess it just depends on how much you really want to have people come, but knowing with schools that it's all comes down to pricing.
Yeah, and they schools may only get 1 or 2 field trips a year. Two is really pushing it these days just because of busing costs. So think about that. And every school, like just every school is different. So talk to them about how it works in their school. Some are covering the cost of a registration cost or a per kid student cost. Um, for the field trips, and some are passing those along to the families to pay for those experiences for their students too. So just having a good conversation with that teacher about how does it work in your school or in your grade level, um, for those payments that they're going to get.
Yeah. So, and then also when I've come to at the end of our group, we all kind of congregate back at the milking parlor so they can still watch the cows go around on the rotary. But I find that's really good because then all of a sudden, teachers are asking questions, or there's chaperones that come over and ask questions that didn't do it during the tour part. Even a kid will come over and say something. So then I always try to come up with something that I know that I stated to everybody, and ask the question to find out, who can give me the correct answer of it, whether it was like how many fans were in a barn for the cooling ventilation part, and then I'll give away a t-shirt or something. So it just keeps them interactive and and to see if they really did pay attention. So
That's
makes
good
me feel good
teaching.
about myself.
Yeah, good teaching strategies.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? I tried to get all the questions that were in the chat box. What other questions are there?
There is one just for you in the Q&A section. They are asking if you could touch more on what makes a great self-guided tour.
Oh, I don't think I can talk about that. I hate to say, I don't think I'm the person to answer that question because most of the tours that we are doing are facilitated by someone. So, a lot, I didn't really share any, I didn't post in any pictures, but when I'm taking adult groups, um, I have a tour guide system that I've invested in and that I use, and that makes a world of a difference. Jess has used it before. We use it on her farm. And so all my teachers will have headsets on. And it's like if you, well, you know, when you tour Italy and you get a guided tour piece. So they can be programmed to do that. But I usually use them in a live sense so that no matter where anyone is in the group, whether they're way in the back or whether they're way in the front, or we go into a lot of loud places. A parlor is loud. You know, a freestyle can be loud with fans. Just a lot of equipment moving, you know, feed pushers happening. And so those tour guide systems tend to be incredible for engagement of the whole tour. And I've used them with students before too, but just not as often as I do because I'm mostly doing adult groups. But those tour guide systems really do change the whole dynamic. Instead of having somebody way in the back not paying attention because I can't hear you, they can be in you. I see people in their own little worlds, looking and playing and touching the cows or whatever it is we're looking at, or walking through the greenhouses way at the other end of the greenhouse. And we have this incredible Cornell researcher talking about raspberry varieties. Um, they're still engaged. They're still listening. They're still listening to all the questions that are answered, but they don't have to be right up in their grill, or they don't have to be at the front of the group to hear all this great information that's being shared. So I do really recommend if there's a system that works in your budget, or some of our extensions have them now, to borrow them for tours. It's really great.
Yeah, I've had used those before and I agree they are great. We do have a poll question up, so if folks could take advantage of that. There is one more question for Jessica. How many school tours do you do per year? And comment is, it sounds like a lot, and it does sound like a lot.
So every year it changes because if you get something positive, it gets spread to the next teacher, school, class. I would say right now we're up to about 25 a year, and they all range in different sizes. But then I was just gonna touch back with the self-guided tour. At our on-farm events, like we can't answer everybody's question. It's just impossible. But we do put up signs explaining things. Like there's a sign in front of the milking parlor explaining the process as the cow's going around on the rotary. You know, there's signs by the milk tankers that explain how much milk is in the tank. You know, just even a sign saying, you know, we do everything possible to provide cow comfort. You know, we have signs that explain the cow with the hole in her side and why we, you know, she's our donor cow and we take her rumen juices to feed to other cows to make them feel better. So signage, I think, is really important. It's a big upfront cost, but it's a one-time upfront cost. And it answers questions for people. And if they still don't feel like they understand it, then they're going to come and find you if they can. So, but yeah, that's an upfront cost. But yeah, I mean, like I say, every year we've grown in school tours, and just even in the summertime, we get, you know, grandparents that have their grandkids for the day and they need something for them to do. So they, you know, swing by the parlor unexpectedly and stuff. So I would say in the summertime, stuff like that, we get at least 2 to 3 a week. We keep our barn doors open for visitors from 9 to 4, because that's typically when somebody's here, and then can, you know, if I'm not available, there's somebody on my team that can definitely answer questions. And if usually they'll give them a quick tour, but if they're looking for something more in depth, then they will contact me and then we can set something up more. But yeah, school groups are, you know, during COVID, it completely died off. Pre-COVID, we probably only did like 5 or 6, but then once COVID disappeared, I guess you can say, finally started coming back around, and it's come full guns blazing. So that's been nice.
Great. We have one more question that came in about biosecurity, and that is a concern for a lot of different types of operations. I know the dairy farms that we've done tours with through Dairy in the Classroom through Katie, we have the plastic booties that we have on hand for the kids to put on, the students to put on and wear. I think biosecurity is a good concern, especially if the group that's coming is going from one farm to another, say on like an open farm days. You do need to be aware of that because you don't want to transfer any type of disease from one farm to the next. Katie, I don't know if you have any thoughts, or Jessica, to follow up with that.
So like we do have adult groups typically will want to have, I'll offer them the booties, especially if we're walking and it's muddy out. So weather conditions. But kids, most of the time, because we just contain them to the wagon, I'm not too worried about, you know, that aspect, but also kids with booties is a nightmare. Trying to put them on, take them off, garbage. My boot ripped, someone stepped on my boot, you know, all those. We've been through it. So it's just because we don't really trek them around walking wise too much. I don't worry about it, but like you say, if there's an open farm day and you're going farm to farm, then plastic boots are definitely the way to go. Or have like a boot wash station where there's those mats that you can put water and like even just Clorox in, and then they just kind of step into it to sanitize their boot off a little bit. So. And
Yeah.
hand sanitizer, we have to have hand sanitizer everywhere just because of a health aspect too. So like if they're petting the calves when they get back on the wagon, it's like, here, everybody take a squirt of hand sanitizer.
Yeah, we I mean, just hand washing stations and general sanitizer, hand washing stations, especially if they're going to lunch, just thinking about that piece is essential. Other biosecurity notes and concerns follow the same notes that Judy and Jessica mentioned, with booties and washing boots. We also, if we're doing, I tend to do a lot of multiple tours in a day, depending on the structure of the event we're hosting. And I just try to be thoughtful about what I'm putting first and what I'm putting second. So trying to not go to a dairy farm first and then go to an apple packing house. So just try to do it vice versa, just food safety concern wise. But with HPAIV, it is changing. Some farms are not allowing visitors at this time, because of just watching those transmission rates and protecting their herds. We just don't do. I have heard of other farms asking if anyone in the class has birds at home, outdoor flocks. And so some are putting restrictions in about coming to visit their farm if they have a flock, if they have birds at home. So I have heard of that happening where they're putting some of those restrictions in place.
It's understandable because that is so darn contagious at this point. Well, we are 2 minutes away. I'm gonna just say thank you very much to both of you. This was a fantastic conversation. I truly appreciate that.